Hello everyone. Welcome to E-Classes by Dr.Athira. Today's topic is tooth eruption. As you all know, teeth develop within the tissues of jaws. For developed teeth to become functional, they need to emerge or erupt into the oral cavity and reach the occlusal plane. As you can see in this image, there is a developing tooth germ in the jaw. As 1/3 of its roots is formed, it starts moving in the occlusal or axial direction. And this movement is complete, or this process of eruption is complete only when this tooth reaches the occlusal plane. So, eruption can be defined as axial or occlusal movement of tooth from its developmental position within the jaws to functional position in the occlusal plane. But one thing you have to understand is these movements are quite complex and can be divided into three stages like pre-eruptive tooth movements, eruptive tooth movements and post-eruptive tooth movements. Pre-eruptive tooth movements are movements made by the tooth germ of deciduous and permanent teeth within the tissues of jaw bones before they begin to erupt. There is difference in patterns of pre-eruptive tooth movements between deciduous tooth germs, successional permanent tooth germs and permanent molar tooth germs. Let's see how pre-eruptive movements of deciduous tooth germs. As you can see in this image, initially the primary tooth germs, deciduous tooth germs, are small in size and there is good deal of space between them. But as the tooth germs develop, they grow in their size and it results in crowding. This crowding is alleviated by the growth of the jaw. As the jaw grows, the posterior tooth germs, that is the primary molar tooth germs, moves posteriorly and the anterior tooth germs, that is the incisor and canine tooth germs, moves anteriorly, marking the pre-eruptive movements of deciduous tooth germs. Coming to the pre-eruptive movements made by the successional permanent teeth, initially, as you can see in this image, both primary and permanent tooth germs are present within the same bony crypt. Here it is a primary anterior tooth germ and its permanent successor in the same bony crypt, and in this image it is the primary molar and its successor, that is the premolar tooth, in the same bony crypt. Later, permanent anterior tooth germs moves lingual to their predecessor and the premolar tooth germs moves to occupy a position between the roots of the primary molars, as you can see in this image. The permanent molar tooth germs, which do not have predecessor teeth, shows a different type of pre-eruptive movement. Initially, the maxillary permanent molar tooth germ shows a distal inclination and mandibular permanent molar tooth germs show a mesial inclination. As the jaws grow, these tooth germs swing into their position. As you can see in this image of maxilla, the maxillary permanent molar tooth germ is distally inclined as its long axis is indicated by this red arrow. After the pre-eruptive tooth movement, they swing into a position after which its long axis will be along this red dotted arrow. Similar rotatory movement occurs even for a mesially inclined mandibular molar. Now let's see what are the histological changes that occur within the bone when tooth germs makes it pre-eruptive movements. The pre-eruptive movements basically occur by two processes, which are eccentric growth of the tooth germs and bodily movement of the tooth germs. Eccentric growth means tooth germ grows only from its one side, as you can appreciate in these images. There is growth of this side of the tooth germ, which is facilitated by resorption of the bony crypt wall in this side of the growth. Thus, the growth of the tooth germ, eccentric growth of tooth germ, is facilitated by the bony resorption of the crypt wall. Now coming to bodily movement. Bodily movement of tooth germ means whole tooth germ moves and occupy a different position within the bone. In this image, you can see the tooth germ moving posteriorly as indicated by this arrow. As the tooth germ moves posteriorly, there is resorption of the bony crypt wall on the side of the movement as indicated by this red shaded area. Thus, the bodily movement of tooth germ is facilitated by the resorption of the bony crypt wall here. But at the same time, there is infilling or formation of bone on the opposite side of the bony crypt wall. Thus, bodily movement of tooth germ is facilitated by remodeling of bony crypt wall. So, to summarize, pre-eruptive movements are nothing but the movements to position the teeth within the jaw preparatory to eruption. Now let's move on to the very important and quite complex second stage of tooth movement, that is eruptive tooth movements. It is made by the tooth to move from its position within the bone of the jaw to its functional position in the occlusal plane. The mechanism of eruption for deciduous and permanent teeth are similar. I said it is complex because a lot of histological changes and various mechanisms are involved in this process, as tooth moves a greater distance axially, crossing the bony as well as soft tissue barriers to emerge into the oral cavity, and also in the same direction it further moves to reach the occlusal plane. So the major histological changes that occur during eruptive movements are beginning of development of root, onset of development of periodontal ligament, and development of dento-gingival junction. Now if you see how root formation is connected to eruption, the eruptive movement is found to start once 1/3 of root formation is complete. Development of periodontal ligament also starts as root formation begins. Dental follicle fibers surrounding the tooth starts organizing in oblique direction around the developing root, as you can see here. Periodontal ligament has very important role in eruption, and to facilitate eruption, lot of histological changes occur in periodontal ligament as well as the cells, the fibroblast. One such important feature is development of cell-to-cell contact or intercellular adhesions, as you can see in this image. Thus, one cell makes contact with 20 to 30 adjacent cells. Another important feature is development of actin and myosin microfilaments, as you can see here, which are internally connected to the cell membrane. These filaments gives the cell a contractile property, so the periodontal ligament fibroblasts are termed as myofibroblast. Not only the fibroblasts are connected to each other, but also they develop connections with extracellular collagen fibers of periodontal ligament, which is known as fibronexus. The glycoprotein facilitating this fiber to cell adhesion is known as fibronectin, which you can see surrounding this fibroblast here attached to their cell membrane. The fibronectin filaments are quite organized in the myofibroblast. So, fibronexus are fusion of intracellular contractile filaments and extracellular collagen by thickening of cell membrane and appearance of adhesive glycoprotein fibronectin, thus enabling cell and fiber attachment. Here you can see the intracellular contractile filaments attached to the cell membrane and extracellular filaments attached to the cell membrane by means of fibronexus. Another important feature of periodontal ligament fiber is that it even undergoes continuous remodeling as well. Now, to summarize, this image shows Myofibroblasts, which are attached to each other by means of intercellular junctions, and the myofibroblasts attached to the extracellular collagen by means of fibronexus. Since such connections are there, contraction of one myofibroblast will be transmitted to adjacent cells and fibers. Thus, periodontal ligament act as a single unit to produce a greater contractile force which can facilitate the process of eruption. This mechanism will be described in much more detail ahead of this presentation. Finally, development of tendogingival junction is another histologic change during eruptive tooth movement. Here you can see a developing tooth getting ready for eruption. The crown is covered by reduced enamel epithelium, and this is the oral epithelium. Reduced enamel epithelium releases certain enzymes which cause the degradation of connective tissue in the eruptive path. So as the tooth erupts, the path of eruption is devoid of any connective tissue. As you can see, during eruption, the reduced enamel epithelium joins with the oral epithelium, and this fusion marks the beginning of development of dentogingival junction. The epithelial cells in the center undergoes degeneration and the tooth erupts or emerges into the oral cavity. As I said earlier, the path of eruption is devoid of any connective tissue, so there is no bleeding during eruption. I am sure you all have seen kids with erupting tooth, but without any bleeding, even though this hard structure is piercing the oral mucosa, is it not? So as the tooth erupts, or as it moves occlusally, the epithelial attachment moves apically and forms the dentogingival junction, that is the junction between the gingiva and the tooth. Gubernacular canal and cord is a feature present only during eruption of permanent successor teeth, which include permanent anteriors and premolars. As I said, in pre-eruptive movement of successor teeth, the deciduous and their successors share the same bony crypt. Once the deciduous teeth erupt into the oral cavity, it leaves a pathway of eruption continuous with dental follicle of its permanent successor. This pathway shows no bone formation and is filled with connective tissue, which is known as gubernacular canal. So after the shedding of deciduous tooth, you can imagine there is a clear path of eruption, that is gubernacular canal, which is continuous with oral mucosa on one side and dental follicles surrounding the permanent successor tooth germ on other side. Thus the gubernacular canal guides the eruptive movement of permanent successor teeth. In the gubernacular canal, the remnants of dental lamina may be found, which are known as gubernacular cord. Here you can see the dental follicle surrounding this permanent tooth germ is continuous with the gubernacular cord and canal, and here you can see there is no formation of bone in the area of gubernacular canal, or the bony crypt surrounding the permanent tooth germ is not continuous due to the presence of gubernacular canal. And this canal persists even after the shedding of deciduous tooth. Later, the canal widens by resorption of bony crypt on either side of the canal, and the permanent successor tooth is guided for eruption. Here in this H&E diagram, you can see the gubernacular canal and the gubernacular cord, which is the remnants of dental lamina. Once the tooth reaches the occlusal plane, it is in its functional position. But if the jaw grows further, or if there is continuous occlusal or interproximal wear of teeth, they move to compensate for all these and to get back to their functional position, which are known as post-eruptive tooth movements. When you see the histology of post-eruptive tooth movement, there is secondary cementum formation at the apex of the root when tooth moves occlusally to compensate for occlusal wear. And if there is any interproximal wear or jaw growth, tooth will show mesial migration. During mesial migration, there is remodeling of the bony socket surrounding the tooth. That is, resorption of bone on the mesial side and formation of bone on the distal aspect of the socket. Now, let's move on to the final but very important part of this topic, the mechanisms or theories of tooth movement. The idea behind this discussion is to explore what are the forces or mechanisms that cause movement of tooth. Many authors have come up with various theories to describe this, and important theories of eruption are bone remodeling theory, vascular pressure theory, root formation theory, and periodontal ligament traction theory. The periodontal ligament traction theory is the most accepted theory, and according to this theory, tooth is pulled into the oral cavity, whereas other three theories says tooth is pushed into the oral cavity. First one is bone remodeling theory. You know what is bone remodeling? Selective resorption and deposition of bone. According to this theory, bone remodeling is responsible for tooth movement. But this theory is objected due to the fact that bone resorption occurred due to the pressure of moving tooth and not vice versa. The second theory, the vascular pressure theory, says the pressure of tissue fluid and the capillaries near the apical area of the growing root is more than that of the coronal area, and this positive pressure can cause occlusal or eruptive movement of tooth. Even though there is a force due to vascular pressure, this alone is not sufficient to cause tooth eruption, which is a drawback of this theory. The third theory of eruption is root growth theory. According to this theory, growing root exerts pressure apically on a fixed base, which can be translated in the opposite direction, resulting in eruption of tooth. And according to the authors of this theory, the fixed base is something known as cushion hammock ligament. And they said it is a sling-like structure which is present in the apical area of growing root. But the objections for this theory are, if the cushion hammock ligament acts as a fixed base, this must be inserted on either side of the alveolar bone. But there are no such insertions for this ligament. And later it was found only a pulped delineating structure. If the pressure is exerted on the alveolar bone, there is resorption, so it cannot act as a fixed base. And if the root growth has relation to the eruption, this must start immediately after the onset of root growth, but it doesn't happen. Tooth eruption starts only when 1/3 of root is formed, and eruption is complete before the root completion itself. Now let's move on to the most accepted periodontal ligament traction theory. Almost all the features that contribute to this force of periodontal ligament traction we have discussed earlier. Is that the periodontal ligament fibroblasts have contractile property because they contain actin and myosin contractile filaments, and this contractile force can be transmitted to the adjacent fibroblast and the collagen fibers because of the presence of intercellular junctions and the fibronexus. Thus, periodontal ligament can act as a syncytium or a single unit to cause a larger force of contraction which is sufficient to pull the tooth into the oral cavity. During contraction, the orientation of fiber changes and tooth moves upward little. As you can see here, the orientation of fiber changes during the eruptive movement. And once the fibroblasts relax, the fibers will be back to their normal orientation. And this process repeats to complete the eruption process. This whole process of eruption by periodontal ligament traction can be simulated with the sailor pulling the rope to move the boat. Here the sailor is fibroblast, the rope is collagen, and the moving boat is the erupting tooth. So to conclude, eruption is a multifactorial phenomenon in which periodontal ligament traction plays a major role and other three mechanisms plays a minor role. So it is the end of this topic, tooth eruption. Thank you all for listening.